happy lady because her son has been quite the sensation, also called the Colombian sensation, Sebastian Monto.
Thank you very much.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Golf Radical Cup here at Dubai Autodrome. It is the third race of the weekend that we are preparing for, and it is going to be quite the thrilling battle. We start our coverage with qualifying, and this is of course going to be a very different challenge compared to yesterday. On Saturday we had two races that were of the sprint race variety. Today it's the Enduro, 45 minutes, and it will be shared drivers, so it's going to be a very technical challenge and a very different style of racing over the course of the day. Hello everybody, Jake Sanson here with you once again from the Dubai Autodrome. It's a gorgeous Sunday morning and we are going to have some excellent battles from our competitors out on the circuit. And to start the ball rolling, we have timed qualifying. There is George King getting himself ready for his endurance qualifying run. And of course it is going to be very, very different to what we saw in yesterday's battles. Obviously over the course of the day we had two thrilling races, including the second in particular, where we saw a wheel-to-wheel tussle for at least half a lap side by side between George King and Ian Loggy, the race eventually being won by the Scottish star Ian Loggy to get two wins over the course of yesterday, and that will have given him so much joy and pleasure, having had such a brilliant run up until that point. But his second place in the championship notwithstanding, he really wanted to put on a good show yesterday at the Dubai Autodrome, and he is doing just that. Now this could be a bit of an issue because yesterday George King had problems at the end of qualifying with an engine malfunction that basically kept him out of racing in race one and meant he had to play it quite conservative in race two. Now it looks to me as though the problem may have returned. And that is definitely not good news if he's been so dominant over the first part of the season and now all of a sudden he's having engine problems. He's definitely going to want to cure that as the season continues, because that is not going to help him out at all. Meanwhile, out on the circuit, the rest of the drivers are getting it done the way they should be. So they're definitely starting to get into the stride. And so the cars are going to be lapping the circuit and doing their very best. That's not good news. Look, George King is actually being wheeled back to his garage. Clearly, something is not quite well with his Radical. And that is definitely not what we needed to see from him this morning. He wanted to be in a competitive position, and he's just not really going to get the chance to show that. Certainly in the first part of qualifying. Hopefully they can get him out in reasonable time to set a competitive lap time as the session continues to progress, but certainly at the moment it is definitely not going his way, and he really doesn't want to be struggling at this early stage of the weekend, because there's going to be all sorts of difficulties if that continues. So essentially now the drivers are out there on the circuit trying to make hay while the sun shines, which is going to do pretty much all day today, as the competitors are trying to get their lap times sorted out on the circuit. So it'll be an interesting challenge, and it will be a very tough battle as the competitors are racing away for position. But the qualifying laps are going to be very interesting as the competitors are coming through on this Grand Prix circuit. 5.32 kilometers of the Grand Prix circuit. So it's definitely going to be a very close run thing. With just over 10 minutes in the time qualifying session, it will be very, very exciting to see how the competitors will line up on the circuit. It was Alex Bukenshoff that was able to get the pole position time in yesterday's sprint qualifying sessions by 19 thousandths of a second to George King, but that was when the trouble really started to brew. Ian Loggy was up in the mix. The car behind him on the road there is Marcus Bamberg. There's Murad in the Team Pakistan car. And obviously he's going to be one to keep an eye on over the course of the day, because he was very consistent and competitive yesterday in the sprint races. There is James Sweetnam, who ended up unfortunately retiring from the second race yesterday on the first lap after a little bit of a nudge from one of his competitors, who made a bold move into turn 15. And it ended up causing a little bit of an issue for James Sweetnam. He pulled straight into the pits and retired, which was definitely not in the game plan. But the competitors are now putting themselves around the course. Now, interestingly, there are two drivers whose transponders are not actually working while they're out on the circuit. That's what we've got on the timing screens in front of us anyway. Zaire Morad and Marcus Bamberg. Apparently their transponders are not working. And it's only really been the first part of the session where the timing screens are actually coming on. They weren't really working at the first point, but now they are. So we will finally get to see the lap times as the drivers come through. But they've only just started their first competitive laps out on the circuit anyway, so it's not really, you haven't really missed much in terms of the times that are going. And you can see there are still drivers who are trying to warm up the tyres a little bit. You don't get long in the qualifying enduro race to qualify in the Golf Radical Cup here in the United Arab Emirates. It is only 15 minutes out on the circuit. And then, of course, we'll be building up to the start of races. And there will be 3 F4 UAE races today, 2 Formula Regional races, and the endurance race right here on this channel for the Golf Radical Cup of the United Arab Emirates. There is Wang, the number 10, putting on a bit of a show at the moment. So Ray Yu Wang is hoping that he's going to have a very competitive run. James Sweetnam across the line. That's the first competitive lap time. A 2:04.913 from Sweetnam. Very, very strong. So it's all going well for him. And that looks like a pretty consistent lap time, to be fair. You're not going to get much faster than that. Johnny Kazoum has gone second on a 2:06. Mazza on a 2:07.5. Loggy, where does he go as he comes through? Well, Ian Roberts has come through for second. Fazulin has gone top on a 2:04.736. Where's Ian Loggy out on the circuit? He hasn't come through yet. So he is still on a fast lap as Abdulnazir Al-Hamidi goes fifth on a 2:07.2, just in behind Roberts and Kazoum. Jacopo Mazza, as I pointed out, has come through in 6th position for the moment. There is Marcus Bamberg in the retro Leighton House colours of his car. A real style and flair to this machine. It really does look good. Any racing car really does look good in the vintage Leighton House F1 colours. It looks absolutely gorgeous. And across the line, Chosek has gone 7th. Wang has gone 8th. We've got two big names coming across the line now. And that is Al-Kazemi is one of them, the 47, and he has come through for a fairly competitive lap time there. Julien Moni is still trying to get up to speed across the line. That is Murad, who has now come through on a 2:06.1, but he has a transponder issue, so it'll take a few seconds for his time to register on the circuit. As Alex Bukatsov goes top, 2:04.4. That is a very strong lap time to start with, but it's bad news for George King, who has not got out with a technical problem at the moment. Marcus Bamberg is going to come across the line fairly soon indeed. There is George King. So they have got his car going again. Wow, thank goodness for that, because it was looking pretty tenuous for a little while. With a new front end, there is Damien Chosek, who had problems in race 1 and ended up getting beached on the curb through turn 1. Across the line goes Ian Loggy. He has not done a competitive time, a 2:21.9 there for Ian Loggy, so he's still warming up to go for the one ultimate fast lap. And the only other driver that hasn't set a lap time yet is George King. So Sweetnam is 2nd, Fazulin is 3rd, so Sweetnam has improved and gone on to a 2:04.6 now. So very strong performance so far. And there goes Johnny Kazoum. Johnny Kazoum has moved up. So Johnny Kazoum has picked up another place. Very interesting stuff so far from the competitors. So as Kazoum comes across the line, what is George King going to do? This is going to be a slow lap whatever happens, because he's still building up tyre temperature. He's got 5.5 minutes, so he needs to make a little bit of impact. He's pulled right off the racing line there to try and generate some heat into the tyres and brakes. Hopefully he's not going to pull off, because that looked a little bit cautious. Now here's Ian Loggy, the 2-race winner yesterday. He won double over the course of Saturday. Won the first race at a canter, and then in the second race he really had to fight George King for it. So I have a feeling that the race 2 win was even more satisfying than the race 1 victory. But Alex Bukatsov, oh, you can see how much Ian Loggy's pushing. Goodness me, flirting with disaster over the curbs there. He really is pushing it. But that is exactly what a racing driver should do in qualifying. You've got to flirt with the limit. And there is Mohamed El-Kazemi getting into 3rd place on a 2:04.612. So good progress being made. But at the moment it is Alex Bukatsov, and he goes faster still, a 2:04.0. We might even break the 2:03 mark going in through this qualifying session. They're going to need to beat Alex Bukatsov in this one. The Russian goes fastest, 2:04.0. Then it'll be Johnny Kazoum. Then it will be Mohamed El-Kazemi in 3rd place. Ian Roberts is 4th, Sweetnam is 5th, Fazulin is 6th, then Al-Hamidi, Murad, Matza and Chosek. What about Loggy? Where is he going to put the car? Pole! Look at that, 2:02.6 from Ian Loggy. No wonder he was pushing it on the curb, because that was an absolutely audacious dance with the curbs. A very good lap time indeed there from Loggy. Right, George King, what have you got in response, mate? Because that is as good as I can go for a first flyer. That was absolutely brilliant from George King yesterday in qualifying to get up alongside Alex Bukatsov, but Ian Loggy has definitely thrown down the gauntlet. Johnny Kazoum has improved. He's gone to a 2:03.9 across the line. As up comes Jacopo Matza. Ian Roberts has come through on a 2:04.598. That puts him into 5th ahead of Al-Kazemi. But Ian Loggy is the fastest man out there, and he's still going fast. So there is Johnny Kazoum, having just gone into 2nd. Good job so far from Loggy. Pushing it like stink out there, as he really is trying to go for the fast times. Now, the one car that hasn't come through to set a fast time, according to my timing screen, is still George King. So he's crossed the line now and done a 2:17.9, but that was his warm-up lap, as it were. He's got 3 minutes to try and find a fast and competitive lap time around the course. So Loggy again, that was a lot tidier, so it looks a little bit smoother. Now, if he hasn't lost as much time as he did that one, so very exciting stuff. So the battles continue as they race for position. Loggy going for the pole position time here in qualifying. There's only 2 minutes 42 left in the session, but George King is on a fast lap. Is he going to be able to get anywhere near the top 3, or have his engine issues caused the car to be dipped in pace? Because he couldn't get the car started at the start of qualifying about 12 minutes ago. So what can George King do? Marcus Bamberg going across the line. Has he improved on his pace? No, he remains in a 2:05.3 for the moment. Oh no, sorry, he has improved because obviously he's got a bit of a problem with the transponder. What has Loggy done as he comes across the line this time? It's a 2:02.7, so he doesn't quite improve. But he's still the fastest driver. That lap on its own right would have been good enough for pole position. So a 2:02.7 for Ian Loggy. It's pretty quick. It's still quicker than anybody else has managed to go. Johnny Kazoum second, Alex Bukansov is third, James Sweetnam is fourth, and then Roberts, Fezulin, Al-Kazemi, Matza, Chosek, Al-Hamidi and Murad from Marcus Bamberg, Ray Yu Wang and Julien Moni. The only driver yet to set a time is George King, but surely that will be fairly imminent because he's not got a lot of time, a minute and a half to lay down a lap. Roberts does not improve as he comes across the line. He's still fifth. There is Alexander Bukansov, who was pole position yesterday. And there is James Sweetnam. Where's the sister car? That's what we want to know. George King should be out there getting a fast lap in. In fact, that's George King going across the line, and he's done a 2:03.3. So that is second for George King. 2:03.35 for George King. So he has gone up to second position. So not bad, but he still needs to find another 0.7 of a second if he's going to beat Ian Loggy, and this is going to be his last chance. So there is Johnny Kazoum, who will be on his final flying lap as well. As well will be Jacobo Matza, who is in 9th place on a 2:04.8. So fascinating stuff so far, but Ian Loggy is out in front of George King, then Johnny Kazoum, Alexander Bukatsov. Mohamed Al-Kazemi is 5th, James Sweetnam is 6th, from Roberts, Fezulin, Matza and Chosek. Then Al-Hamidi, who's way down in 11th. I would have expected him to crack the top 6 in this qualifying session. And then Zaya Murad, Marcus Bamberg, and the last two are Ray Yu Wang and Julien Moni. Car 47, that's Mohamed Al-Kazemi. His lap is to be deleted for track limits at turn 12. So that is unfortunate. His best lap time, which has currently put him towards the top 6. Marcus Bamberg comes up to 7th place. There we go. That's more like it. Puts himself up into P7. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time is up. So they've got to race back to the line. They've got to have a completely clean lap. Checkered flag is out. James Sweetnam cannot improve, so he remains in P6. This is Johnny Kazoum. Can he crack the front row of the grid? He's got to get into the 2:03.3s in order to do that. His best is a 2:03.9. Checkered flag is out. So what can Johnny Kazoum and Jacobo Matza do to improve? I think actually Johnny Kazoum backed off on the final part of the lap. So there's no improvement there. Last couple of drivers coming across the line, and Roberts goes 4th. Good lap time from Roberts. He displaces Johnny Kazoum. What about Abdulnazir Al-Hamidi? Is he able to get into the top 10 with his final lap? No, he remains 12th. Now over the line goes George King. Can he go fastest? Yes, he does! 2:02.607 by just 0.02 of a second. George King has found the lap in the very last lap of qualifying. Well, he made us sweat for it, but George King has gone to the pole. But is Ian Loggy going to go quicker? Final part of the lap for him. There's James Sweetnam cruising in, but can Ian Loggy find a little bit more on his final lap? He's got to find an additional 0.17 of a second if he wants to topple George King. There goes Zaya Murad in the Team Pakistan car. He comes through. Can he make a final improvement? No, he cannot. He remains 13th on a 2:05.0. Here comes the 47. That is Mohamed Al-Kazemi, is it? Oh, no, sorry. That is one of the other competitors coming through. So where is Ian Loggy? He's going to remain second, I do believe. So it'll be George King who gets the pole position. Marcus Bamberg finishing off his lap as he comes out of the final turn. But it will be George King from Ian Loggy and Alex Bukansov, Ian Robertson, Johnny Kazoum, Mohamed Al-Kazemi and James Sweetnam from Marcus Bamberg. And then it is Amir Fezulin, Jacobo Matza, Damian Chosek, Abdulnazir Al-Hamidi, Zaya Murad, Ray Yu Wang and Julien Moni. Well, talk about saving the best till last. George King gets the pole position with his final flying lap, and he does so by just 0.16 of a second. You cannot blink in that time. That is absolutely phenomenal. George King puts it on the line and manages to grab the pole position. So all the problems he had yesterday, and even the few pre-qualifying jitters he had at the start of the session, hopefully have now abated. And we're going to see the George King that you know and love as he runs at the front end of the field. He will leave the grid in the rolling start in the endurance race later from pole position, with his colleague and rival Ian Loggy on the front row of the grid with him from Alex Bukansov and Ian Roberts. Fascinating battle, and it really is going to be very, very tight indeed at the front end of the field between those two. King and Loggy having an exceptional tussle and a great battle, and they will give us so much drama and plenty of action in the 45-minute Enduro later today. A great qualifying session, plenty of excitement, and now we will focus on the race this afternoon, 45 minutes. And the next race out on the circuit is going to be the second race of the weekend from the F4 UAE Championship, and we are looking forward to seeing how that plays out. So the competition is going to be very, very intense and very exciting indeed from the drivers in the Golf Radical Cup. That 45-minute race will see myself alongside Chris Milbourne in the commentary box. So we're going to have a fantastic battle all the way throughout. So let's look over the highlights of the qualifying session, and we will wrap up proceedings here in the Golf Radical Cup qualifying session. A bit of a tricky one for George King. Right from the start of the session, all was not well with the number 14, and that permitted everybody else to warm up the car and get everything together. It was a very tricky qualifying session for some. James Sweetnam not quite managing to crack the top 6 on this occasion. Ray Yu Wang going as well as he could, but the car is not quite up to speed from his point of view. Some good performances throughout. Zaya Murad, despite a transponder issue, was able to get a 2:05.5 under his belt and then decrease that to a 2:05.0. Good performances for all round. Mohamed El Kazemi got himself into the top 6 despite a deleted lap time, so he can be happy with his progress. Ian Loggy pushing very hard indeed, managed to grab a 2:02.623, a very competitive lap time indeed, and held pole position for the majority of the session. But once George King finally got his act together, he was able to leave it to the last and bring out an exceptional lap. Damian Chosek with his new front end, able to continue up in the front end of the field. Johnny Kazoum just missing out on the first 2 rows of the grid, with Ian Roberts displacing him right at the last minute. But it's a fabulous pole position for George King, and deservedly so, right at the death. So we will get ourselves ready for the Golf Radical Cup endurance race later this afternoon. Our attention will now focus on the F4 UAE Championship race, which is coming up very shortly. Join us this afternoon for Golf Radical Cup and stick around, because at the Dubai Autodrome,